The morning sun beat down on the firing range at Forward Operating Base Sentinel, turning the sand into a shimmering mirror of heat. Corporal Helena Vance adjusted her grip on the M249 squad automatic weapon, feeling the familiar weight settle against her shoulder. The weapon was a beast, over 22 pounds loaded, and she loved every ounce of it. Behind her, she could hear the whispers. They thought they were being subtle, but sound carried across the flat desert terrain like secrets on the wind. That's the third time this week Holloway's made her qualify, Specialist Travis Brennan said, his voice dripping with amusement. You'd think he was trying to prove something. Private First Class Owen Ridgway snorted. Maybe trying to prove she can't handle it. Look at her, man. She's what, 5'6"? That saw probably weighs a quarter of what she does. Helena's jaw tightened, but she didn't turn around. Instead, she focused on her breathing, on the target's downrange, on the controlled rhythm that had become second nature over 3 years of service. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you serve alongside remarkable soldiers who proved everyone wrong. She trained on the M249 until her hands knew every contour, every quirk, every millimeter of play in the trigger. She'd fired it until the recoil pattern was as familiar as her own heartbeat. Staff Sergeant Derek Holloway emerged from the observation tower, his boots crunching on the gravel. His eyes were hidden behind tactical sunglasses, but Helena could feel his skepticism like a physical weight. She'd felt it every day since joining 3rd Platoon, Bravo Company. "Vance, you're up," Holloway called out. "Standard qual course. 200 rounds, mixed targets, 3-minute time limit." Helena nodded, moving into position. The M249 felt alive in her hands, an extension of her will. She could hear Brennan and Ridgway moving closer to watch, probably expecting her to struggle with the weapon's notorious recoil. The range went hot, with a piercing electronic tone. Helena engaged immediately, her world narrowing to sight picture and trigger control. The M249 roared to life, spitting brass casings in a glittering arc. Her body absorbed the recoil with practiced ease, muscles remembering thousands of hours of training. Targets dropped downrange with mechanical precision. Close-range pop-ups, mid-range silhouettes, distant markers that would challenge most shooters. Helena worked through them systematically. The weapon sustained fire capability, allowing her to engage multiple threats in rapid succession. She could feel their eyes on her, judging, waiting for her to fail, waiting for the weapon to overwhelm her, for her arms to tire, for the heat and recoil to break her concentration. But Helena had been breaking expectations her entire military career. The M249 bucked against her shoulder like a living thing, but she controlled it with absolute authority. Each burst was measured, controlled, devastating. She shifted targets with fluid economy of movement, her tactical awareness processing the entire range at once. The electronic tone sounded again, marking the end of the qualification. Helena saved her weapon and stood, ejecting the magazine and clearing the chamber with smooth professionalism. Silence hung over the range like humidity. Holloway walked downrange to check the targets, his expression unreadable. Brennan and Ridgway exchanged glances, their earlier amusement fading into something more complicated. Respect fought with stubborn prejudice in their eyes. When Holloway returned, he held a tablet displaying her scores. "Perfect qualification," he said, his voice flat. "Every target neutralized, 0 misses, exemplary time." He paused, and Helena could hear the unspoken criticism forming. "But you know the M249 isn't just about range performance, Vance. Combat situations are different. The weight, the sustained fire requirements, the tactical mobility needed under pressure." Helena met his gaze without flinching. "I understand that, Staff Sergeant. Do you?" Holloway removed his sunglasses, and Helena saw genuine concern mixed with his doubt. "Because when we're out there and contact goes hot, I need to know that every member of my squad can perform. That weapon could mean the difference between life and death for everyone around you." "I'm ready, Staff Sergeant," Helena said quietly. whatever the situation calls for. Brennan stepped forward, unable to contain himself any longer. Come on, Sarge. She did great on the range, I'll give her that. But humping that saw through a 12-hour patrol? Maintaining fire discipline when you're exhausted and the adrenaline hits? He shook his head. No disrespect, Corporal, but there's a reason most M249 gunners are built like linebackers. Helena felt the familiar burn of frustration, but she kept her voice level. The weapon doesn't care about the shooter's size, specialist. It cares about training and discipline. Easy to say on a calm morning at the range, Ridgway added, emboldened by Brennan's challenge. Different story when rounds are coming back at you. Holloway held up a hand, cutting off the debate. Enough. Vance qualified expert, same as the rest of you. She's assigned to the saw, and that's final. He turned to Helena, his expression softening slightly. But they're not completely wrong, Corporal. I've seen bigger soldiers struggle with sustained operations using that weapon. Just make sure you're ready for what's coming. What's coming, Staff Sergeant? Helena asked. Holloway's jaw tightened. Briefing at 1400. We've got a convoy mission through the Kadir Valley. High-risk route, potential for contact. I need every weapon system operating at peak efficiency. He looked pointedly at the M249 in Helena's hands, especially the heavy firepower. As Holloway walked away, Helena felt the weight of doubt settling over her like a second uniform. Not her own doubt. She knew her capabilities, knew what she could do with the M249. But the doubt of others was its own kind of burden, constant and exhausting. Brennan approached, his expression caught between grudging admiration and persistent skepticism. Look, Vance, that was impressive shooting. Really, but Holloway's right to be concerned. That mission through Kadir is no joke. Last convoy through there took contact from multiple positions. If you're holding the saw and you can't maintain fire when we need it most. I'll be ready, Helena interrupted, her voice carrying an edge of steel. When the time comes, I'll do my job. She walked away before he could respond, the M249 cradled professionally across her chest. Behind her, she heard Ridgway mutter something to Brennan, but she didn't catch the words. She didn't need to. She'd heard every variation of doubt, every subtle and not-so-subtle suggestion that she wasn't capable of handling the responsibility they'd given her. The armory was blessedly cool after the scorching range, and Helena took her time cleaning and inspecting her weapon. Each component received meticulous attention, each surface checked for wear or damage. The M249 was more than equipment to her. It was proof that she belonged, that she could do everything they could do, that size and gender meant nothing against skill and determination. Sergeant First Class Marcus Okonkwo found her there an hour later, working with focused intensity. The veteran soldier watched silently for a moment before speaking. Heard you shot perfect qual this morning. Helena didn't look up from her work. Yes, Sergeant. Also heard Holloway's still not convinced. Okonkwo settled onto a bench nearby, his dark eyes thoughtful. You know why he pushes you harder than the others, right? Because he doesn't think I can handle it, Helena said quietly. Okonkwo shook his head. Because he's seen good soldiers die when their equipment failed them or when they couldn't perform under pressure. He's not doubting your ability, Corporal. He's doubting his own judgment in approving your assignment to the saw. That's supposed to make me feel better? Helena finally looked up, meeting his gaze. It's supposed to help you understand the weight he carries. Every decision, every assignment, every mission. When we roll out that gate tomorrow, Holloway owns the responsibility for every life in that convoy, including yours. Okonkwo stood, moving toward the door. Show him he made the right call, Vance. Not with words, with performance when it counts. After he left, Helena sat alone with her weapon and her thoughts. Tomorrow's mission through the Kadir Valley would be her 5th convoy patrol, but it would be the first where she carried the M249 as primary firepower for her vehicle. The responsibility was immense, and she felt its pressure like a physical force. But pressure was something Helena Vance understood. She'd felt it her entire military career, every time someone looked at her and saw only limitations instead of capabilities. Every time she had to prove herself twice as hard for half the recognition. Every time she walked into a room and felt the weight of lowered expectations. Tomorrow would be different, she told herself. Tomorrow, when the stakes were real and the pressure was unbearable, she would show them all exactly what she was capable of. The M249 gleamed under the armory lights, cleaned and ready, a promise of fire and fury waiting to be unleashed. Helena just hoped she'd get the chance to prove them wrong before their doubt became a self-fulfilling prophecy. The briefing room was packed with bodies in tension when Helena arrived at 1355. She found a seat near the back, the M249 resting across her lap. Around her, the other members of 3rd Platoon settled into their chairs with the restless energy of soldiers about to roll outside the wire. Holloway stood at the front beside a digital map display, his face carved from stone. Lieutenant Commander Patricia Sundberg entered a moment later, her presence commanding immediate silence. The lieutenant commander was a rarity in their forward operating base, a female officer who had earned her rank through multiple combat deployments and an unshakable competence that even the most skeptical soldiers respected. "Gentlemen," Sundberg began, her eyes scanning the room and landing briefly on Helena with a flicker of acknowledgement. "And Corporal Vance, today's mission is a high-priority convoy escort through the Kadir Valley to forward operating base Phoenix. We're transporting essential supplies, medical equipment, and ammunition. The route is approximately 40 kilometers, estimated travel time 4 hours." She tapped the display, and the map zoomed in on a winding road that snaked through brutal terrain. The Kadir Valley was notorious, a natural corridor that had seen more ambushes than successful transits in the past 6 months. "Intelligence indicates increased insurgent activity in the region," Sundberg continued. 3 separate IED attacks in the past 2 weeks, plus small arms contact on the last 2 convoys that attempted this route. "We're looking at a high probability of enemy engagement." Helena felt her grip tighten on the M249. Around her, soldiers shifted in their seats, the casual atmosphere evaporating like water on hot sand. Holloway stepped forward, his tactical pointer highlighting specific sections of the route. "We're running 6 vehicles. 2 MRAPs up front, 2 supply trucks in the middle, and 2 more MRAPs bringing up the rear. Each vehicle will have a designated gunner." He paused, his eyes finding Helena. "Corporal Vance will be manning the M249 in MRAP 3, middle of the formation." Brennan raised his hand. "Staff Sergeant, that's our primary defensive position if we take contact from the flanks. You sure about the assignment?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Helena felt every eye in the room turned toward her, measuring, doubting, questioning. Her face remained impassive, but inside, anger burned hot and bright. Holloway's jaw clenched. "Corporal Vance, qualified expert on the saw yesterday. She's assigned to the weapon, and that's the end of the discussion." His tone left no room for argument, but Helena could hear the underlying uncertainty. He was defending her assignment while still harboring his own doubts. Sundberg intervened smoothly. "The M249 provides sustained suppressive fire capability that could be critical if we encounter a coordinated ambush. Corporal Vance has demonstrated proficiency with the weapon system." She looked directly at Helena. "I expect you to perform to the standard you've shown on the range, Corporal." "Yes, ma'am," Helena replied, her voice steady despite the pressure building in her chest. The briefing continued with tactical details, rally points, communication protocols, and emergency procedures. Specialist Layla Farouk, the platoon medic, would be riding in MRAP 3 as well, positioned to respond to casualties anywhere in the convoy. Okonkwo would command MRAP 2, while Holloway would lead from MRAP 1. "Expected departure is 0600 tomorrow," Sundberg concluded. "Weather forecast shows clear skies, temperatures exceeding 100 degrees by mid-morning. Hydrate heavily tonight and tomorrow morning. The last thing we need is heat casualties before we even make contact." She paused, her expression hardening. "This is a dangerous mission through hostile territory. Stay alert, Follow your training and watch out for each other. Dismissed. The room erupted into motion as soldiers filed out, their conversations a low rumble of speculation and nervous energy. Helena remained seated, checking her weapon one more time, running through mental rehearsals of potential scenarios. Corporal Vance, Sundberg called out. "A word, please." Helena approached the front of the room, where Sundberg waited alongside Holloway. The lieutenant commander's expression was unreadable, professional distance maintained with practiced ease. "I'm sure you're aware of the skepticism surrounding your assignment," Sundberg said without preamble. "Some of it is legitimate concern based on the physical demands of the M249. Most of it is bias and outdated thinking." "Ma'am, I'm ready for this mission," Helena said firmly. "I believe you are," Sundberg replied. "But belief isn't enough in combat. Performance is everything. You'll be in a critical defensive position tomorrow. If we take contact, dozens of lives may depend on your ability to maintain sustained, accurate fire under pressure. Can you do that?" Helena met her commanding officer's gaze without wavering. "Yes, ma'am, I can do that." Sundberg studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Good, because I fought hard to get more women into combat roles in this unit. Every time one of us succeeds, it opens doors. Every time one of us fails, it slams them shut for everyone who comes after. Do you understand the weight you're carrying?" The word struck Helena like a physical blow. She'd known, intellectually, that her performance represented more than just her own career. But hearing it stated so baldly, the responsibility for every future female soldier resting on her shoulders, made the pressure almost unbearable. "I understand, ma'am," Helena said quietly. After Sundberg dismissed her, Holloway remained, his arms crossed over his chest. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone, Vance. Just do your job." "With respect, Staff Sergeant, I have everything to prove," Helena replied. "You know it, and so do I. Every single person in that briefing room is wondering if I can handle the saw when things go sideways, including you." Holloway's expression flickered with surprise, then something that might have been respect. "You're right. I am wondering. Not because I want you to fail, but because I've seen what happens when equipment or personnel can't perform under fire. I've carried wounded soldiers. I've written letters to families." His voice dropped lower. "I've held dying men who trusted me to make the right tactical decisions. Then trust that I know what I'm doing," Helena said. "Trust that I've trained for this, that I understand the responsibility, that I won't let this platoon down." "We'll see tomorrow," Holloway said simply. "Make sure you're ready." Helena spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. She checked and rechecked her gear, inventoried ammunition, studied maps of the Kadir Valley until she could navigate it in her sleep. The M249 received another thorough inspection, every component scrutinized for any potential failure point. That evening, she found Farouk in the medical bay, organizing supplies for the convoy. The medic looked up with a tired smile. "Hey, Corporal, ready for tomorrow's adventure?" "As ready as I can be," Helena replied. "You?" Farouk shrugged, her hands continuing to pack medical kits with practiced efficiency. "I'm always ready to patch people up, just hoping I won't have to." She paused, glancing at Helena. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're on the saw. I've seen you shoot. You're better than half the guys who've held that position." "Thanks," Helena said, surprised by the unexpected support. "Don't thank me yet," Farouk said with dark humor. "Thank me if we all make it back in one piece." Later that night, Helena lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling of her quarters. Sleep felt impossible with adrenaline and anxiety coursing through her system. Around her, the base hummed with its usual nocturnal rhythms, generators providing power, guards walking their posts, the distant sound of helicopters coming and going. She thought about Sundberg's words, about the weight of representation, about every female soldier who would come after her. She thought about Holloway's concern, about his experiences carrying wounded and writing letters home. She thought about Brennan and Ridgway and all the others who looked at her and saw only limitations. But most of all, she thought about the M249, about the way it felt in her hands, about the controlled fury it could unleash. She thought about 3 years of training, of proving herself again and again, of qualifying expert on every weapon system she touched. Tomorrow, the Kadir Valley would test her in ways the firing range never could. Tomorrow, doubt would either be validated or shattered. Tomorrow, Helena Vance would discover if she was truly ready for the responsibility she'd fought so hard to earn. She finally drifted into restless sleep just after midnight, her dreams filled with the sound of gunfire and the weight of expectations she couldn't escape. The M249 waited beside her bunk, cleaned and loaded and ready. Whatever tomorrow brought, Helena would face it with the same determination that had carried her this far. The question was whether determination would be enough when the bullets started flying and 50 lives depended on her ability to control a weapon that most people believed she had no business carrying into combat. Tomorrow would provide the answer, written in fire and blood and the unforgiving reality of war. Dawn broke over forward operating base Sentinel with the promise of brutal heat. Helena was already awake, had been for hours, running through final preparations with methodical precision. The M249 sat beside her, ammunition belts checked and rechecked, every round accounted for. She'd loaded 800 rounds total, distributed across multiple belts and backup magazines. It was more than standard loadout, but something in her gut told her to be prepared for sustained engagement. The motor pool buzzed with activity as convoy vehicles underwent final inspections. Mechanics crawled over the MRAPs, checking armor plating, testing communication systems, ensuring every mechanical component was mission-ready. Helena approached MRAP-3, her assigned vehicle, and began her own inspection of the gun mount. The turret position was exposed, elevated above the vehicle's armored body to provide 360-degree fields of fire. It was also the most vulnerable position in the entire convoy, a fact that wasn't lost on Helena as she climbed up to familiarize herself with the setup. "Looking good up there, Vance," a voice called from below. Helena looked down to see Brennan approaching, his expression unreadable in the pre-dawn light. "You sleep at all last night?" "Some," Helena replied, which was mostly a lie. "Maybe 2 hours total." "You?" Brennan shrugged. "Enough. Look, about yesterday, the stuff I said in the briefing." He paused, searching for words. "I wasn't trying to be a jerk. It's just this route is no joke. Last convoy through Kadir, the saw gunner in the lead vehicle took a round through the shoulder in the first 30 seconds of contact. Couldn't maintain fire, and it got ugly fast." Helena climbed down from the turret, meeting his eyes directly. "I'm not going to take a round through the shoulder, Brennan. And even if I do, I'll still maintain fire until someone pulls me off that weapon." He studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, I'm starting to believe you might actually mean that. Just watch yourself out there, okay? We need that saw operational." "It will be," Helena promised. Ridgway appeared around the side of the MRAP, carrying additional ammunition cans. He set them down with a grunt, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the early hour. "Corporal, these are your backup belts, already linked and ready to feed." He hesitated, then added, "Brennan's right. That gun position is critical. We're counting on you." The words carried weight beyond their surface meaning. It wasn't quite an apology for the doubt, but it was acknowledgement, recognition that whatever their personal opinions, they were all in this together once the convoy rolled out. "I won't let you down," Helena said simply. Okonkwo emerged from the vehicle's interior, his experienced eyes taking in the scene. "Good, you're all here. Listen up. We got about 20 minutes until wheels up. Vance, you're going to be exposed up in that turret. Hydration is critical. Farouk's loaded extra water in the vehicle, and I want you drinking every 15 minutes whether you think you need it or not. Heat casualties are just as dangerous as enemy fire." "Yes, Sergeant," Helena replied. "Brennan, you're driving. Ridgway, you're on navigation and secondary security. Farouk's got medical and will relay communications to other vehicles. I'll be commanding from the front passenger position." Okonkwo's voice carried the calm authority of someone who'd done this dozens of times before. "We hit contact, everyone knows their job. No heroes, no freelancing. We work as a team, we all go home." The four of them nodded in unison. Despite the tension, despite the doubts and skepticism that had characterized the past weeks, there was something comforting about the familiar structure of military discipline. Everyone had a role, everyone had training, everyone understood the mission. Holloway's voice crackled over the radio net, calling all vehicle commanders to the lead MRAP for final coordination. Okonkwo headed off, leaving Helena alone with Brennan and Ridgway. "You really think you can handle sustained fire with that thing?" Ridgway asked, gesturing at the M249. "I mean, I've seen guys twice your size struggle after the first few hundred rounds. The recoil, the heat, the weight of repositioning under fire." Helena picked up the weapon, settling it into a comfortable carry position. The M249 doesn't care how big you are. It cares about technique, about understanding recoil management, about proper body mechanics. I've fired this weapon so many times that it's practically part of me. Size isn't the limiting factor. Training is. Brennan exchanged a glance with Ridgway. "We're about to find out if that's true." Farouk climbed into the MRAP, her medical bag secured beside her seat. She caught Helena's eye and offered a small smile. "Don't let them get in your head, Corporal. I've watched you train. You know what you're doing." "Thanks, Layla," Helena replied, grateful for the support. The next 15 minutes passed in a blur of final checks and mounting tension. Helena climbed back into the turret, securing herself into the harness system that would keep her stable during movement and potential contact. The M249 mounted smoothly onto its pivot, and she ran through range of motion tests, ensuring she could engage targets in any direction without mechanical restriction. The Kadir Valley route map was burned into her memory. She knew every potential ambush point, every position where enemy fighters might set up to engage the convoy. The road wound through rocky terrain with limited visibility, natural choke points that tactical doctrine identified as high-risk areas. If they were going to hit contact, it would happen in one of 3 specific locations she'd identified during her map study. "All vehicles, this is Sentinel 6. Holloway's voice came through the radio. "Final communications check. Sound off by vehicle number." One by one, the vehicles reported ready status. When Okonkwo called in for MRAP 3, Helena felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. This was the moment where all the training, all the preparation, all the doubt and determination would be tested against reality. "All vehicles green," Holloway confirmed. "Mission is go. Maintain interval spacing, stay alert, and remember your training. Let's bring everyone home safe." Convoy rolling in 60 seconds. Helena adjusted her tactical goggles, settled her grip on the M249, and scanned the horizon. The sun was climbing now, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. It would have been beautiful if the circumstances were different, if they weren't about to roll into one of the most dangerous corridors in the entire theater of operations. The convoy lurched into motion with the grinding rumble of heavy diesel engines. MRAP-1 took point, followed by the first supply truck, then Helena's vehicle in the 3rd position. Behind them came the 2nd supply truck and the 2 rear security vehicles. 6 vehicles, 48 personnel, all depending on each other to survive whatever the Kadir Valley had waiting for them. As they passed through the main gate of forward operating base Sentinel, Helena took one last look at the relative safety of the fortified compound. The guard towers, the concrete barriers, the familiar routines of military life. Then they were outside the wire, rolling into hostile territory where every rock could hide an IED, every ridge could conceal enemy fighters, every kilometer could be their last. The desert stretched out before them, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. Helena's hands remained steady on the M249, her eyes constantly scanning, her mind processing threats and angles and fields of fire with automatic precision. She'd trained for this moment for 3 years. She'd fought for the right to be in this position despite every doubt and every skeptical voice. Now the Kadir Valley would judge whether she truly belonged here, whether her determination was enough, whether the M249 in her hands would save lives or fail when it mattered most. The road ahead wound through brutal terrain, and somewhere along its length, Helena knew with absolute certainty the enemy was waiting. The convoy pushed deeper into the valley, and with every passing kilometer, the weight of responsibility grew heavier. But Helena Vance had never been one to collapse under pressure. She'd spent her entire military career proving that she could carry burdens others assumed were too heavy for her. Today would be no different. Today, she would show them all exactly what she was capable of, one way or another. The M249 hummed with potential energy under her hands, ready to unleash fire and fury the moment the valley revealed its deadly secrets. The Kadir Valley swallowed the convoy like a mouth closing around prey. Rocky ridges rose on either side of the narrow road, creating natural corridors that channeled their movement and limited escape routes. Helena's tactical awareness screamed warnings as they penetrated deeper into terrain that seemed designed specifically for ambush. The heat was already brutal at 0700, the sun hammering down with relentless intensity. Sweat soaked through Helena's uniform, running down her face and stinging her eyes. She blinked it away, maintaining her scan pattern, the M249 tracking with her eye movement as she searched for threats. All vehicles, reduce speed to 20 clicks, Holloway ordered over the radio. Approaching Checkpoint Alpha. Stay sharp. Checkpoint Alpha was the first of the high-risk areas Helena had identified during mission planning. The road narrowed here, forced between two steep rocky outcroppings that provided perfect overwatch positions. Her grip tightened on the M249 as MRAP-1 slowed, the entire convoy compressing like an accordion. "I don't like this," Okonkwo muttered from inside the vehicle. "Too quiet. Where are the locals? We should be seeing shepherds, farmers, someone." Helena had noticed the same thing. The valley was eerily deserted, no sign of the civilian population that normally moved through this area. It was as if everyone knew something the convoy didn't, as if they deliberately cleared out to avoid becoming collateral damage. "Ridgeway, check thermal imaging," Okonkwo commanded. "See if you're picking up any heat signatures on those ridges." "Negative on thermal," Ridgeway reported after a moment. "But that doesn't mean much. They could be using terrain masking or waiting until we're fully committed to the kill zone." Helena's eyes never stopped moving, scanning rock formations, searching for the telltale signs of disturbed earth that might indicate IED placement, looking for anything that seemed out of place in the natural terrain. Her mind cataloged firing positions, calculated angles of attack, identified where she would set up an ambush if she were the enemy. "There," she called down into the vehicle. 2 o'clock, approximately 400 meters. Fresh tire tracks cutting off the main road. She'd spotted them just as MRAP-3 rounded a curve, parallel marks in the sand that had no legitimate reason to be there. Okonkwo relayed the information to Holloway, who ordered a brief halt while the lead vehicle investigated. The convoy sat motionless in the valley, engines idling, every soldier's nerves stretched tight as wire. "Could be nothing," Brennan said from the driver's seat. "Locals use these side trails all the time. Or it could be enemy fighters positioning themselves while we're sitting here like targets," Farouk countered. Her medical training made her acutely aware of vulnerability, of how quickly a routine patrol could turn into a mass casualty situation. Helena kept the M249 trained on the ridgeline, her finger resting alongside the trigger guard in textbook-ready position. She could feel the weight of the weapon, the promise of firepower it represented. 800 rounds ready to deploy, enough sustained fire to suppress an entire company if necessary. The question was whether she'd actually get the chance to use it or whether doubt about her capabilities would limit her employment in contact. Movement, Helena reported sharply. 11 o'clock, rigid topi. Single individual, moving east to west. All eyes turned toward the position she'd identified. For a moment, nothing was visible. Then a figure appeared briefly against the skyline before disappearing behind rock cover. "Could be a shepherd," Ridgeway suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Shepherds don't sprint along ridgelines when they see military convoys," Okonkwo replied grimly. "They either freeze or approach for handouts." That was deliberate concealment movement. Holloway's voice came through the radio with measured tension. All vehicles, we've got possible enemy observation. Maintain defensive posture, but prepare to move on my command. We're not sitting here any longer than necessary. The lead MRAP finished examining the tire tracks and reported back. Tracks are fresh within the last 6 hours. Multiple vehicles, possibly technical trucks based on wheelbase width. Tracks lead northeast into the high ground. Perfect ambush setup, Okonkwo said quietly. They drive into position under cover of darkness, dismount their crews, and wait for targets of opportunity. We just became their opportunity. Helena felt her heartbeat accelerate, adrenaline sharpening her senses to razor focus. This was the moment before contact, the terrible anticipation when you knew violence was coming but didn't know exactly when or from where. Training took over, her breathing regulated, her muscles relaxed despite the tension, her mind clear and ready. All vehicles, resume movement, Holloway ordered. Increase speed to 30 clicks. We're pushing through this position. Gunners, weapons free, unconfirmed hostile targets only. Stay disciplined on your fire control. The convoy lurched back into motion, picking up speed as they tried to minimize exposure time in the danger area. Helena's world narrowed to the task at hand, scanning constantly, searching for the threat she knew was there, the threat that was watching them right now and calculating the perfect moment to strike. Another figure appeared on the opposite ridge, this one carrying what looked like a radio or phone. Helena tracked him with the M249, calling out his position to Okonkwo, who relayed it forward. The convoy was being observed from multiple positions, enemy fighters coordinating their response, waiting for something. They're letting us get deeper, Farouk said, her voice tight. They want us fully committed to the valley before they spring the trap. She was right. Helena could see the tactical logic of it, the patience that spoke to experienced fighters rather than impulsive amateurs. They were going to waste their ambush on the lead vehicle alone. They wanted the entire convoy strung out, vulnerable, unable to support each other effectively. The road curved ahead, following the natural contours of the valley floor. Helena's mental map placed them approximately halfway through Checkpoint Alpha, still in the high-risk zone, but moving toward more open terrain beyond. If they could just make it another kilometer, they'd have better maneuver room, better fields of fire for defensive response. Contact left, MRAP-1 called out suddenly, taking small arms fire from ridge position 300 meters north. The radio erupted with reports as the ambush initiated. Helena heard the distinctive crack of rifle fire echoing off the valley walls, saw muzzle flashes from multiple positions on both ridges. The enemy had waited until the convoy was perfectly positioned, trapped between high ground with limited escape routes. All vehicles, maintain speed and suppress targets as you pass, Holloway commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos. Do not stop, do not bunch up. Keep moving and fight through. Helena's training kicked in with automatic precision. She identified muzzle flashes on the left ridge, calculated range and windage, and prepared to engage. But something held her back, some instinct that told her this initial contact was just the opening move. Vance, you have targets at 10 o'clock, Okonkwo called up to her. Why aren't you engaging? Because they want us to focus on those positions, Helena replied, her eyes scanning the opposite ridge. They want our attention on the left while the real threat sets up on the right. Even as she spoke, she saw it. Movement on the eastern ridge, multiple fighting positions being occupied simultaneously, heavier weapons being brought to bear. Not just rifles, but crew-served weapons, machine guns that could shred the lightly armored portions of the MRAPs. Contact, right, Helena transmitted. Multiple positions, crew-served weapons, range 400 meters. They're setting up for sustained fire. Holloway's response was immediate. All vehicles, focus suppression right side. Left side shooters are harassment only. The real threat is East Ridge. The convoy's response shifted as gunners adjusted their fields of fire. But Helena could see what was coming, could read the enemy's tactical setup like a book. This wasn't just an ambush. This was the opening move of something much larger, something designed to stop the convoy completely and destroy it vehicle by vehicle. Her hands remained steady on the M249, ready but patient. The enemy was still positioning, still bringing weapons to bear. In another few seconds, they'd open fire with everything they had. And when they did, Helena would finally get the chance to prove whether all her training, all her preparation, all her determination meant anything in actual combat. The valley seemed to hold its breath, the brief exchange of harassing fire almost insignificant compared to what was building. Helena could feel it coming, could sense the storm about to break. And despite the fear, despite the impossible pressure, despite 50 lives depending on her performance, she felt something else rising inside her. Readiness. This was what she trained for. This was her moment. The M249 waited under her hands, hungry and ready. All Helena had to do was prove she could control it when hell itself came calling. The world exploded into violence with a sound like thunder splitting the sky. The eastern ridge erupted in coordinated fire, machine guns opening up simultaneously from at least 6 positions. Rounds cracked through the air with lethal intent, impacting against armored vehicle plating with metallic screams that sent sparks flying. Helena didn't hesitate. The M249 came alive in her hands, roaring its own fury as she engaged the nearest crew-served weapon position. The recoil hammered into her shoulder with brutal force, but her body absorbed it with practiced technique, muscles and stance working together to control the weapon's violent energy. Her first burst was surgical, 15 rounds that walked directly into the enemy position at 400 meters. She saw dust and rock fragments explode around the target, saw the muzzle flash cease abruptly as the crew abandoned their weapon or died behind it. Target suppressed, Helena called down, already pivoting to the next threat. The M249's sustained fire capability was its greatest strength, and she exploited it ruthlessly. While other gunners had to pause to reload or allow barrel cooling, Helena could maintain continuous pressure on multiple positions. The convoy was taking heavy fire now, rounds hammering against armor from both ridges. The initial assessment had been wrong. The left side wasn't just harassment. It was a coordinated ambush from prepared positions, and the convoy was caught in a perfect crossfire with nowhere to maneuver. MRAP-1 taking heavy contact, Holloway transmitted, his voice strained. Let's apply truck hit, engine damage. Convoy speed reduced. Helena felt the impact of those words like a physical blow. If the convoy slowed or stopped, they were dead. Simple as that. Stationary targets in a kill zone with enemy fighters holding the high ground was a tactical nightmare that ended only one way. She shifted her fire pattern, engaging a new position that had opened up with a heavy machine gun. The enemy weapon was devastating, its larger caliber rounds punching through lighter armor sections. Helena could hear the terrifying sound of penetrating rounds, could imagine the damage being done inside the vehicles. The M249 bucked and roared as she poured fire into the position, walking her rounds up the rocky slope with methodical precision. The enemy machine gun continued firing, its crew protected by good cover and disciplined enough to maintain their position under return fire. I need more elevation, Helena shouted down to Okonkwo. I can't get a good angle on that heavy gun position. Brennan, angle us 15 degrees right, Okonkwo commanded. Give Vance the shot. The MRAP lurched as Brennan adjusted their position, and Helena felt the geometry shift. Now, she had it, a clear line of fire into the enemy position from a slightly different angle. She squeezed the trigger and held it, letting the M249 do what it was designed for. A sustained burst of 40 rounds hammered the position, and this time she saw results. The heavy machine gun went silent, either destroyed or abandoned. Good kill, Okonkwo confirmed. Keep working those positions. Helena was already moving to the next target, her tactical awareness processing the entire battlefield simultaneously. She could see the pattern now, could read the enemy's intent. They weren't trying to destroy the convoy outright. They were trying to disable vehicles, separate the formation, create isolated targets they could overwhelm individually. The convoy was bunching up as the damaged supply truck struggled to maintain speed. MRAP-2 was nearly touching its rear bumper, and Helena's vehicle was closing the gap as well. Exactly what Holloway had warned against, exactly the scenario that would maximize casualties. All vehicles, maintain interval, Holloway ordered, but the command was nearly impossible to follow with damaged vehicles limiting movement options. An explosion rocked the valley as an IED detonated under the rear supply truck. Helena felt the shockwave, even from her position 3 vehicles ahead, saw debris and smoke billowing into the air. The rear security MRAPs immediately opened fire with everything they had, suppressing suspected trigger positions. Rear supply truck immobile, came to report. Vehicle destroyed, crew status unknown. Requesting immediate medevac. Farouk was already moving inside MRAP-3, preparing medical supplies and coordinating with other medics in the convoy. Her voice was calm despite the chaos, professional training overriding fear. Helena continued to work her sector, engaging targets as they appeared, suppressing positions that threatened the convoy. The M249 was heating up now, barrel temperature climbing toward critical levels. She could feel it through her gloves, could smell the acrid scent of burning powder and hot metal. But she didn't ease off. Couldn't ease off. Every position she suppressed was one less gun firing at the convoy, one less threat to the soldiers trapped inside damaged vehicles, one less enemy fighter who might kill someone she was sworn to protect. A round cracked past her head, close enough that she felt the supersonic shockwave. Sniper, probably, taking careful aimed shots at the exposed gunner positions. Helena ignored it, ignored the fear, ignored everything except the task at hand. The M249 continued its deadly work, spitting brass and fire in equal measure. "Vance, you need to manage your ammunition," Okonkwo called up. "You're burning through belts too fast." Helena had already done the calculation. She'd fired approximately 300 rounds in less than 2 minutes of sustained contact. At this rate, she'd be dry in another 6 minutes. But 6 minutes of continuous suppressive fire might be the difference between survival and annihilation for the convoy. "I've got 500 rounds remaining," Helena reported. Engaging critical threats only. She forced herself to be more selective, firing controlled bursts instead of sustained streams. 3 to 5 round bursts, precisely aimed, maximum effect with minimum ammunition expenditure. It went against every instinct that screamed to keep the enemy's heads down through sheer volume of fire. The convoy was fighting back now, all functional weapons engaging targets across both ridges. The valley echoed with the sound of battle, a continuous roar of explosions and automatic weapons fire that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Helena saw movement in her peripheral vision, enemy fighters attempting to maneuver closer to the convoy under cover of the ridgeline. They were trying to get into grenade range, trying to position for devastating close-range attacks against the stalled vehicles. "Contact, troops in the open," Helena transmitted. 9 o'clock, 200 meters, approximately 12 fighters moving toward convoy positions. She pivoted the M249, bringing it to bear on the new threat. This was what the weapon was designed for, what made it irreplaceable in the infantry arsenal. Sustained fire against multiple targets in the open. Helena squeezed the trigger and walked her fire across the advancing enemy formation. The effect was immediate and devastating. Fighters scattered, diving for cover, their coordinated advance breaking apart under the withering fire. Several went down, whether hit or just seeking protection. Helena couldn't tell and didn't care. The advance was stopped, the immediate threat neutralized. "Outstanding shooting," Vance Okonkwo said, genuine respect in his voice. "You just saved the convoy's left flank." But there was no time to acknowledge the praise. More threats were emerging, more positions opening fire, more enemy fighters committing to the attack. The ambush was intensifying, growing from harassment to a full-scale assault designed to destroy every vehicle and kill every soldier in the convoy. Helena's arms were beginning to burn from the strain of controlling the M249, from absorbing hundreds of rounds worth of recoil, from maintaining the precision necessary to make every shot count. Sweat poured down her face. Her breathing was labored from heat and exertion, and her water supply was running dangerously low. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The convoy needed the M249, needed its sustained fire capability, needed her to keep performing at a level that many had doubted she could achieve. Brennan's earlier words echoed in her mind about the previous auger taking a round and failing to maintain fire, about how ugly it had gotten when that happened. Helena Vance would not be that gunner. She would not be the weak link that broke the chain. She would hold this position and maintain this fire until either the enemy was defeated or she physically could not continue. The M249 roared again and again and again, each burst carefully controlled, each target deliberately selected, each round bringing the convoy one step closer to survival. The valley had become hell itself, but Helena stood in the fire and refused to break. The battle reached a fever pitch as enemy reinforcements poured into the valley from hidden positions. Helena could see them now, fighters emerging from caves and concealed fighting positions that had been prepared long before the convoy ever entered the kill zone. This wasn't an opportunistic ambush. This was a carefully planned operation designed to destroy an entire American convoy. MRAP-1 reporting critical damage. Holloway transmitted, his voice tight with pain. "I'm hit." Transferring command to Okonkwo. Vehicle still mobile, but barely. "We need to break contact now, or we're going to lose everyone." Okonkwo's response was immediate and calm despite the chaos. "All vehicles, prepare for fighting withdrawal. We're not leaving anyone behind. Rear security, establish suppressive fire, and cover our movement. Everyone else, maintain fire discipline and prepare to move on my command." Helena continued engaging targets, her world reduced to sight picture and trigger control. The M249 was scorching hot now, heat waves rising from the barrel, but it kept firing. 400 rounds expended, 400 remaining. She had to make every one count. A rocket-propelled grenade streaked across the valley, missing MRAP-2 by meters and exploding against the rocky slope in a shower of shrapnel and stone fragments. The enemy was escalating, bringing heavier weapons to bear, trying to finish the convoy before they could escape the kill zone. RPG teams, multiple positions, Helena called out. "I need coordinates for air support or artillery." "Negative on fire support," Okonkwo replied grimly. "Communications are degraded, and we're too close to enemy positions for effective engagement. We fight our way out with what we have." Helena felt a surge of fear, quickly suppressed. No artillery, no air support, no quick reaction force coming to save them. Just 6 damaged vehicles and fewer than 50 soldiers against an enemy force that seemed to grow larger by the minute. The mathematics of survival were becoming increasingly unfavorable. But mathematics didn't account for training, for determination, for the sheer, stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Helena pivoted the M249 toward an RPG team setting up on the eastern ridge, catching them in the open as they prepared to fire. Her burst was perfectly timed, 15 rounds that scattered the team and sent the rocket launcher tumbling down the slope. RPG team neutralized, she reported, already searching for the next threat. The convoy began its fighting withdrawal, vehicles moving backward while maintaining fire on enemy positions. It was one of the most difficult tactical maneuvers to execute under combat conditions, requiring perfect coordination and discipline. One mistake, one vehicle moving too fast or too slow, and the entire formation could collapse. Brennan was sweating profusely as he controlled the MRAP's reverse movement, relying entirely on Ridgway's directions since he couldn't see behind them. His hands were steady on the wheel despite the stress, despite rounds continuing to impact against their armor, despite knowing that one wrong move could send them off the road or into another vehicle. "Steady," Ridgway called out. Maintain current speed. 15 meters to MRAP 4. Holding interval. Helena never stopped scanning, never stopped engaging. Her ammunition was running low now, fewer than 300 rounds remaining. She had to be even more selective, had to make absolutely certain each burst served a critical purpose. Movement on the ridge, new fighters attempting to flank the convoy's withdrawal route. Helena engaged them with a sustained burst that forced them back into cover. The M249's barrel was glowing red now, visible even in the bright desert sun. She was pushing the weapon beyond its design limits, asking it to perform at levels that would destroy most firearms. But the M249 was built for exactly this kind of punishment. It kept firing, kept delivering rounds downrange with mechanical reliability that bordered on miraculous. "Vance, your barrel is going to fail," Okonkwo warned. "You need to reduce your rate of fire." "If I reduce fire, they'll overrun us," Helena replied. "The weapon holds, or we all die. Those are the options." She could hear the truth in her own words. The M249's sustained suppressive fire was the only thing keeping enemy fighters from rushing the damaged convoy. The moment that fire slackened, the moment the enemy realized they could advance without being cut down, the ambush would succeed and the convoy would be annihilated. So Helena kept firing, kept engaging every threat that appeared, kept the M249 roaring its defiance into the valley despite the weapon approaching catastrophic failure temperatures. Farouk's voice came through the internal communication system, tight with controlled fear. "We've got wounded in every vehicle. Multiple casualties in the rear MRAP from the IED strike. I need to get to them, but I can't move while we're under this kind of fire. Keep your head down, Layla," Helena called back. "I'll get you the opportunity. Just be ready to move when I tell you." She identified the primary enemy positions that had the best fields of fire on the convoy, the machine gun nests and rifle teams that were doing the most damage. Then she made a decision that went against every principle of ammunition conservation she'd ever been taught. Helena opened fire with everything she had, pouring sustained bursts into each position in rapid succession. The M249 hammered out round after round, suppressing 4 different enemy positions almost simultaneously. It was a massive expenditure of ammunition, burning through nearly 100 rounds in less than 30 seconds. But it worked. The enemy fire slackened noticeably as fighters ducked for cover, as their positions were systematically hammered by accurate, sustained fire. "Layla, go now," Helena commanded. "You got maybe 60 seconds before they reorganize." Farouk burst from the MRAP, her medical bag bouncing as she sprinted toward the damaged rear vehicle. Helena kept firing, kept the enemy suppressed, gave the medic every second she could buy with bullets and determination. The convoy continued its withdrawal, fighting for every meter of distance from the kill zone. Helena's arms were screaming now, muscles burning from the sustained effort of controlling the bucking weapon. Her hands were blistered inside her gloves from the heat bleeding through the M249's housing. Dehydration was making her dizzy, her vision starting to narrow at the edges. But she didn't stop, didn't slow, didn't give the enemy a single moment to exploit. Ridgway handed up a water bottle, and Helena drank without taking her eyes off the battlefield. The liquid was hot from sitting in the vehicle, but it was moisture, and that was enough. She drained half the bottle in seconds, then returned to the M249. 200 rounds remaining. The mathematics were brutal now. At her current rate of engagement, she had maybe 3 more minutes of effective fire. After that, she'd be down to her sidearm and whatever small arms ammunition they could scavenge from wounded soldiers. The convoy reached a slight rise in the terrain, a small ridge that provided minimal cover but was better than being fully exposed in the valley floor. Okonkwo ordered a temporary halt to consolidate the formation and assess damage. "All vehicles report status," he commanded. The responses painted a grim picture. MRAP-1 barely mobile, with engine damage, and wounded personnel, including Holloway. Lead supply truck destroyed, crew evacuated to other vehicles. Rear supply truck completely destroyed, multiple casualties. Both rear security MRAPs damaged, but functional. MRAP-3, Helena's vehicle, was actually in the best condition despite taking hundreds of rounds of enemy fire. "We can't stay here," Okonkwo said. "Enemy will reposition and hit us again. We need to keep moving, get to more defensible terrain." Helena scanned the valley behind them, watching enemy fighters already beginning to maneuver for another attack. They'd bloodied the ambush force, had killed or wounded dozens of enemy combatants, but they hadn't broken the assault. The fighters kept coming, kept pressing, kept trying to finish what they'd started. Her M249 had perhaps 2 more sustained engagements left before ammunition ran dry. After that, the convoy would lose its primary suppressive fire capability. The enemy would realize it, would exploit it, would press their advantage until the Americans were overwhelmed. Helena Vance looked at the approaching fighters, calculated the odds, and made peace with what was coming. She would fire every round she had. She would hold this position until the weapon was empty or she was dead. And when it was over, when the final accounting was made, no one would ever again question whether she could handle the M249 in combat. The enemy advanced, and Helena prepared to meet them with fire and fury. The valley would remember this day. The question was whether anyone would survive to tell the story. The enemy assault came with renewed fury, fighters emboldened by the convoy's obvious distress. Helena could see at least 30 combatants advancing in coordinated fire teams, using cover and movement techniques that spoke to professional training. These weren't amateur insurgents. They were experienced fighters who knew exactly what they were doing. "All vehicles, resume movement," Okonkwo ordered. "Fighting withdrawal continues. Vance, I need maximum suppression on those advancing teams." Helena didn't waste breath responding. She simply opened fire, engaging the closest fire team with a sustained burst that forced them to ground. The M249 was beyond any safe operating temperature now, the barrel radiating heat that distorted the air around it. But it kept firing, kept cycling rounds with mechanical precision that defied the physics trying to tear it apart. She worked methodically across the advancing formations, never allowing any single team to get established in a firing position. 3-round burst, pivot, 5-round burst, pivot, 7-round burst. Each engagement calculated to maximum effect. Each round precious now that her ammunition was running critically low. 150 rounds remaining. Brennan was driving blind again, backing the MRAP up the rising slope, while Ridgway called out obstacles and distances. The vehicle lurched over rough terrain, throwing Helena around in the turret despite her harness. She compensated automatically, her body adjusting to maintain weapon stability even as the platform beneath her bucked and swayed. An RPG team appeared on the western ridge, the launcher already on the shooter's shoulder, aiming directly at MRAP-2. Helena saw it, calculated the shot in milliseconds, and engaged. The burst was perfect, catching the gunner just as he prepared to fire. The rocket launched wild, spiraling into the sky before detonating harmlessly above the valley. RPG down, Helena transmitted, already searching for the next threat. "Outstanding work, Vance," came a new voice on the radio. Lieutenant Commander Sundberg had somehow gotten into the communication net despite being back at base. "Your performance is keeping that convoy alive. Keep it up." The words gave Helena a surge of energy she desperately needed. Recognition from Sundberg meant everything. Validation that her capabilities were real, that the doubts had been unfounded. But there was no time to savor it. The battle demanded every ounce of her focus. Enemy fighters were trying a new tactic now, sending teams racing down the valley slopes to get below the convoy's line of fire. If they succeeded, they'd be able to attack from dead zones where the vehicle-mounted weapons couldn't depress low enough to engage them. Helena saw the maneuver developing and adjusted her fire pattern. She aimed for the slopes themselves, for the paths the fighters had to traverse, turning the terrain into a killing field with precisely placed bursts. Rocks shattered under the impact of her rounds, sending fragments flying like shrapnel. Dust erupted in choking clouds that obscured visibility and broke up the enemy's coordinated movement. 3 fighters went down, Whether hit by rounds or rock fragments, Helena couldn't tell. The others scattered, their attempt to close with the convoy disrupted by the sheer volume and accuracy of her fire. "How many rounds left?" Okonkwo called up to her. 100, Helena replied. "Maybe less." The words hung heavy in the air. 100 rounds against 30-plus enemy fighters, with more likely moving into position. The mathematics were impossible, the odds insurmountable. But Helena had never been good at accepting what mathematics told her was impossible. "Make them count," Okonkwo said simply. "We're almost to better ground. Just hold them off a little longer." Helena could see the terrain he meant, a rocky outcropping about 200 meters ahead that would provide cover and defensive positions. If they could reach it, they might be able to establish a perimeter and call for effective fire support now that they'd gained some separation from the enemy. But 200 meters might as well be 200 kilometers with an enemy force pressing close and ammunition running dry. She continued firing, each burst more selective than the last, each round carefully evaluated for necessity. The M249's barrel was visibly glowing now, cherry red metal that should have failed minutes ago. Helena could feel the heat radiating up through the weapon's housing, could smell the acrid scent of metal pushed beyond its tolerance. But the weapon held, kept firing, kept delivering rounds with the same reliability it had shown from the first shot of the engagement. Farouk emerged from the rear of the vehicle, having stabilized what wounded she could reach. Her uniform was soaked with blood, her face pale with stress and exhaustion. She looked up at Helena, and their eyes met for a brief moment. "You're keeping us alive up there," Farouk said. "Don't stop now." Helena nodded, unable to spare words. She returned her attention to the battlefield, to the enemy fighters who kept coming despite the devastating casualties they'd already suffered. Their determination was impressive, their tactical discipline remarkable. Under different circumstances, she might have respected them, but these circumstances demanded only that she kill them before they killed her friends. 50 rounds remaining. The convoy was moving faster now, engines straining as they climbed the slope toward the defensive position. Helena could see MRAP-1 struggling, black smoke pouring from its damaged engine, but it kept moving through sheer mechanical stubbornness and Holloway's refusal to accept failure. A heavy machine gun opened up from a new position, rounds hammering into the convoy with renewed intensity. Helena pivoted toward it, identified the muzzle flash, and engaged with a sustained burst. 20 rounds, a massive expenditure from her dwindling supply, but the threat was too significant to ignore. The enemy gun went silent, and Helena allowed herself a grim satisfaction. That was the 5th crew-served weapon she'd neutralized in this engagement. 5 positions that would have shredded the convoy if she hadn't been there, if she hadn't maintained this level of sustained, accurate fire. 30 rounds remaining. Enemy fighters were getting desperate now, taking risks they'd avoided earlier in the engagement. They were standing and firing from exposed positions, trying to mass enough volume to overwhelm the convoy through sheer firepower. It was a mistake born of frustration, and Helena exploited it ruthlessly. She engaged 3 fighters in rapid succession, dropping each with precisely aimed bursts. The M249's accuracy at range was remarkable when properly controlled, and Helena's control was absolute despite exhaustion and heat and the weapon's degraded condition. 20 rounds remaining. The convoy reached the outcropping, vehicles wheeling into defensive positions with practiced coordination. Helena continued firing, covering their movement, keeping enemy heads down as her fellow soldiers dismounted and established a perimeter. 10 rounds remaining. "Vance, conserve ammunition," Okonkwo ordered. "We're in position. You can ease off." But Helena could see what he couldn't from his position inside the vehicle. The enemy was preparing for a final assault, massing fighters for one overwhelming push that would test the convoy's weakened defenses. If they came now, before the perimeter was fully established, they might succeed. She needed to buy more time, needed to convince the enemy that pushing forward would be too costly, that the Americans still had fight left in them. Helena fired her last 10 rounds in a carefully orchestrated display of firepower, engaging multiple positions in rapid succession, making it appear that she had unlimited ammunition and unshakable resolve. The bursts were spaced perfectly, creating the illusion of sustained fire capability even as the M249 cycled its final rounds. The weapon clicked empty, the bolt locking back on an empty chamber. Helena's hands remained steady on a useless gun, maintaining the position, maintaining the appearance of readiness even though she was now defenseless. The enemy hesitated. That moment of hesitation was all the convoy needed. Soldiers established fighting positions. Additional weapons came online, and the defensive perimeter solidified into something that would be far too costly to assault. The enemy fighters recognized it too. Helena watched them pull back, withdrawing to covered positions, their assault momentum broken by her sustained resistance. Weapon dry, Helena reported quietly, her voice hoarse from shouting and dehydration and pure exhaustion. Understood, Okonkwo replied. Come down from there, Corporal. You've done enough. Helena tried to move and discovered that her body had other ideas. Her muscles were locked from sustained tension, her hands cramped around the M249's grips, her legs trembling from the strain of maintaining stability in the turret harness. Brennan and Ridgway climbed up to help her down, their expressions transformed from skepticism to something approaching awe. 800 rounds, Brennan said quietly. You fired 800 rounds in sustained combat and never broke. Never failed. Never gave him an opening. Helena couldn't respond. She was too exhausted, too overwhelmed by what had just happened. They lowered her into the vehicle, and she collapsed onto a seat, her entire body shaking with adrenaline withdrawal. But the M249 came with her, cradled in her arms like a child. The weapon had held when everything else failed, had performed beyond any reasonable expectation, had proven that capability mattered more than size or strength or anyone's preconceived notions about who could handle its fury. Helena Vance had done the impossible, and everyone who'd ever doubted her had seen it happen. The defensive perimeter held as the enemy probed for weaknesses they wouldn't find. Helena sat inside MRAP-3, drinking water that Farouk forced into her hands while the medic examined her for injuries. Her hands were blistered and raw, her shoulders bruised from sustained recoil, her body trembling with exhaustion that went beyond physical into something deeper. You need medical attention for these burns, Farouk said, examining Helena's hands with professional concern. 2nd degree on both palms. How you kept firing with these I'll never understand. Had to, Helena replied simply. Her voice was barely a whisper, throat raw from shouting commands and breathing superheated air from the M249's barrel. Outside the vehicle, Okonkwo was coordinating with the other vehicle commanders, assessing casualties and damage while maintaining defensive vigilance. The enemy had pulled back but hadn't withdrawn completely. They were still out there, still watching, still capable of renewing the assault if the opportunity presented itself. Ridgway appeared in the doorway, his expression serious. Corporal, the staff sergeant wants to see you. Holloway's asking for you specifically. Helena tried to stand and nearly collapsed. Her legs weren't responding properly, muscles pushed beyond their limits during the sustained engagement. Brennan caught her before she fell, his grip gentle despite his obvious strength. Easy there, Vance, he said. You just fought off an entire company with a saw. You're allowed to be a little shaky. He helped her out of the vehicle and toward MRAP-1, where Holloway sat propped against the armored plating. The staff sergeant's left arm was bandaged, blood seeping through the dressing, but his eyes were clear and focused. Around him, other soldiers were treating wounded, consolidating ammunition, and preparing for potential follow-up attacks. Holloway looked up as Helena approached, supported by Brennan. For a long moment, he simply studied her, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice carrying weight that went beyond the words themselves. I owe you an apology, Corporal Vance. I doubted you, questioned your assignment, worried that you couldn't handle the physical demands of the M249 in sustained combat. He paused, pain flickering across his features from more than just his wound. I was wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. Helena didn't know how to respond. She'd wanted recognition, wanted validation, but now that it was here, she felt oddly empty. The doubts had driven her, had pushed her to train harder and prove herself. Without them, she wasn't sure who she was supposed to be. "You saved this convoy," Holloway continued. "Your sustained suppressive fire kept enemy fighters from overrunning our positions. Your tactical awareness identified threats before they could develop. Your weapon handling under extreme conditions was flawless." He met her eyes directly. "I've been doing this for 12 years, and I've never seen anyone, regardless of size or gender, maintain that level of performance with a crew-served weapon." Other soldiers were gathering now, drawn by Holloway's words. Brennan and Ridgway stood nearby, their earlier skepticism completely erased. Even soldiers from other vehicles had moved closer, wanting to see the gunner who had held the line when everything else was falling apart. 800 rounds fired in sustained combat, Okonkwo said, stepping forward. 13 confirmed enemy positions neutralized, including 5 crew-served weapons. Multiple enemy assaults disrupted through precision suppressive fire. He looked at Helena with respect that bordered on reverence. "That's not just competent performance, Corporal. That's exceptional by any standard." Lieutenant Commander Sundberg's voice crackled over the radio, patched through to external speakers so everyone could hear. "Corporal Vance, I'm receiving real-time reports from your position. Your performance today will be going into official after-action reports with commendations. You've proven beyond any doubt that capability has nothing to do with physical size and everything to do with training, determination, and skill." Helena felt tears threatening, quickly blinked them away. She wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of everyone. But the recognition was overwhelming, the validation of everything she'd fought for across 3 years of service. "The M249, she said quietly. "I need to check the weapon. Make sure it's still functional." Brennan retrieved it from the vehicle, handling the scorching weapon carefully even through gloves. He placed it gently in Helena's blistered hands, and she examined it with professional thoroughness despite her exhaustion. The barrel was ruined, warped from excessive heat, and definitely unsafe for future firing. The housing showed heat damage, discoloration from temperatures that should have caused catastrophic failure. But mechanically, miraculously, the weapon was intact. It had survived conditions that would have destroyed lesser firearms. "This weapon needs to be retired to the armory as is," Okonkwo said. "No cleaning, no maintenance. Just document its condition and preserve it exactly as it sits. This is the kind of combat performance that weapons manufacturers need to see." Helena nodded, still holding the M249 like it was part of her. In some ways, it was. The weapon had become an extension of her will during the engagement, had performed impossible feats because she demanded nothing less. Farouk returned with fresh bandages and pain medication. "Sit down before you fall down," the medic ordered. "Your body is in shock, and you're running on adrenaline fumes." Helena let herself be guided to a sitting position against the MRAP's wheel. Other soldiers continued their defensive preparations around her, but many kept glancing her way, their expressions transformed from doubt to respect. Ridgway approached hesitantly, his earlier mockery replaced by genuine remorse. "Corporal, I need to apologize. The things I said, the doubts I expressed, they were wrong. Offensive, actually. You're a better gunner than most of us could ever hope to be." Helena looked up at him, seeing the sincerity in his face. "We all have doubts," she said, "about ourselves, about others. What matters is what we do when those doubts are tested." Still, Ridgway insisted. "I should have trusted your training instead of making assumptions based on nothing but bias." "I'm sorry." "Apology accepted," Helena replied. "Now get back to your position. Enemy's still out there." The perimeter settled into defensive routine as the immediate crisis passed. Radio communications had been re-established, and air support was en route along with a quick reaction force to reinforce their position and evacuate the wounded. The battle wasn't over, but the immediate threat of annihilation had passed. Helena sat with the ruined M249 across her lap, accepting water and medical attention while her body slowly, came down from the combat high. She'd fired 800 rounds in sustained engagement, had held off an entire enemy assault force, had proven every doubt wrong through sheer determined performance. But the victory felt hollow in ways she hadn't expected. 2 soldiers were dead, killed in the IED strike on the rear supply truck. 5 more were seriously wounded. The convoy had survived, but it had paid a terrible price for that survival. Holloway seemed to read her thoughts. This wasn't your fault, Vance. The enemy chose this ground, planned this ambush. All you did was make sure their plan failed. Without your performance on that saw, we'd all be dead right now. Helena nodded, knowing intellectually that he was right, but feeling the weight of those casualties anyway. War didn't care about fault or responsibility. It just kept taking and taking until there was nothing left to give. The sound of helicopters approached from the east, the distinctive thump of rotors carrying across the valley. Medical evacuation and air support arriving together, bringing the promise of extraction and survival. As the aircraft circled overhead, weapons hot and ready to engage any enemy forces that revealed themselves, Helena felt the last of her strength fading. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by exhaustion so profound it felt like drowning. Farouk was there, helping her lie down, covering her with a thermal blanket despite the desert heat. "Rest now," the medic said gently. "You've earned it." Helena's eyes closed, but her hands remained on the M249. Even in exhaustion, even in the aftermath of the most intense combat she'd ever experienced, she couldn't let go of the weapon that had proven her worth. Around her, the convoy prepared for evacuation and the journey back to base. But for Helena Vance, the real journey was just beginning. She'd proven she could handle the M249 in combat, had demonstrated capability beyond what anyone had believed possible. The question now was what came next, how this moment would define the rest of her career, and whether she'd ever again face doubts about her ability to carry the weight that others assumed was too heavy for her to bear. The medical evacuation helicopters landed in controlled chaos, rotors kicking up dust devils that obscured the defensive perimeter. Helena watched from her position as wounded soldiers were loaded with practiced efficiency, Farouk coordinating with the flight medics to ensure the most critical casualties received priority treatment. Holloway was among those being evacuated, his wound more serious than he'd initially let on. As the stretcher bearers approached, he waved them off momentarily and gestured for Helena to come closer. She struggled to her feet, legs still unsteady, and made her way to where he waited. The staff sergeant's face was pale from blood loss, but his eyes remained sharp and focused. "What you did today changes everything," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the helicopter noise. "Not just for you, but for every female soldier who comes after you. The doubts, the assumptions, the barriers, you didn't just challenge them. You shattered them completely." Helena didn't know how to respond to that. She'd never wanted to be a symbol or a pioneer. She just wanted to do her job, to serve with competence, and earn the respect of her peers through performance. "I just did what I was trained to do, Staff Sergeant," she replied. Holloway shook his head. "No, what you were trained to do was operate the M249 to standard. What you actually did was perform at a level that most soldiers couldn't achieve regardless of how much training they received. There's a difference between competence and excellence, Corporal. Today, you demonstrated excellence under the worst possible conditions." The stretcher bearers were getting impatient, medical necessity overriding military courtesy. Holloway allowed them to lift him, but he kept his eyes on Helena until the helicopter door closed and the aircraft lifted into the desert sky. Okonkwo approached as the last evacuation helicopter departed, leaving behind the quick reaction force that had arrived to reinforce their position. The sergeant's uniform was stained with dust and blood, his face lined with exhaustion, but his bearing remained professional and controlled. "We're getting orders to return to base with the QRF escort," he said. "Damaged vehicles will be recovered separately. We'll be riding in their transports." He paused, studying Helena with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Lieutenant Commander Sundberg wants to see you immediately upon return." Official debriefing. Helena nodded, feeling a knot of anxiety form in her stomach. Debriefings were standard after combat engagements, but something about Okonkwo's tone suggested this would be more than routine. The return journey to Forward Operating Base Sentinel took 3 hours, the convoy moving slowly to accommodate the QRF's tactical vehicles and maintain security protocols. Helena rode in silence, the ruined M249 still cradled in her lap, despite Farouk's suggestions that she let someone else carry it. Brennan sat across from her, his earlier mockery completely absent. He'd been quiet since the battle, processing what he'd witnessed, reconciling his preconceptions with the reality of Helena's performance. Finally, he spoke. "I need you to understand something, Vance. When I doubted you, when I made those comments about the saw being too much for you to handle, it wasn't personal. It was just, I'd never seen anyone your size operate that weapon effectively in combat. My experience told me it wasn't possible." "Experience can be limiting," Helena replied quietly. "It tells us what we've already seen, not what's actually possible." "Yeah," Brennan agreed. "I'm learning that now." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "What you did today, maintaining sustained fire with that weapon under those conditions, I've seen guys who outweigh you by 100 pounds fail to do that. Hell, I've seen guys fail to do that who were supposedly expert qualified." "The weapon doesn't care about weight," Helena said. "It cares about technique and determination." "Clearly," Brennan replied, "because your technique was flawless and your determination was absolutely terrifying." In a good way. Ridgway joined the conversation, his voice carrying genuine curiosity. "How did you train for that?" "The sustained fire, the recoil management, the tactical awareness to engage multiple threats simultaneously." Helena thought about the countless hours on the range, the extra training sessions she'd requested, the physical conditioning she'd undertaken specifically to prepare for operating the M249. She'd known the doubts existed, had known she'd need to perform at levels beyond standard to overcome them. "I trained like my life depended on it," she said simply, "because I knew that someday it would. Today proved I was right." The conversation lapsed back into silence as the convoy approached the base. Helena could see the guard towers in the distance, the familiar silhouette of Forward Operating Base Sentinel rising from the desert like a fortress against chaos. As they passed through the main gate, Helena noticed something unusual. Soldiers were lined up along the route, standing at attention despite the informal circumstances. Word of the convoy's engagement had clearly spread, and the base personnel were turning out to acknowledge their return. Okonkwo noticed it too. "That's not standard protocol," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "Someone high up must have ordered this." The convoy came to a halt at the motor pool, and as Helena climbed down from the transport, she saw Lieutenant Commander Sundberg waiting alongside several other senior officers. The entire scene had a formal quality that made Helena deeply uncomfortable. "Corporal Vance," Sundberg called out. "Front and center, please." Helena approached, still carrying the M249, her blistered hands making every movement painful. She came to attention before the assembled officers, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look after hours of combat and travel. "At ease, Corporal," Sundberg said. She gestured to the weapon Helena carried. "I understand that's the M249 you operated during today's engagement." "Yes, ma'am," Helena replied. "Weapon is non-functional due to barrel failure from sustained firing beyond operational limits." One of the other officers, a Colonel Helena didn't recognize, stepped forward. "Corporal, I'm Colonel Raymond Hayes from Division Headquarters. I've been reviewing the after-action reports from today's engagement." His expression was unreadable. "The reports indicate you fired approximately 800 rounds in sustained combat, neutralized 13 enemy positions, and maintained defensive fire that prevented the convoy from being overrun." "Yes, sir," Helena confirmed. "That's accurate." Hayes studied her for a long moment. "I've been in the Army for 23 years, Corporal. I've reviewed thousands of after-action reports, studied hundreds of combat engagements. What you accomplished today with that weapon ranks among the most impressive individual performances I've ever documented." Helena didn't know how to respond to that. She remained at attention, holding the ruined M249, feeling the weight of scrutiny from everyone present. Sundberg stepped forward again. "Corporal Vance, effective immediately, you're being reassigned to Division Headquarters as a weapons systems instructor. Your primary responsibility will be training other soldiers on proper M249 employment and demonstrating that capability is not determined by physical size." The words hit Helena like a physical blow. Reassignment meant leaving her unit, leaving the soldiers she'd fought alongside, leaving everything familiar. But it also meant validation at the highest levels, recognition that her performance represented something significant. "Ma'am," Helena began, then stopped. She didn't know what she wanted to say, didn't know if she wanted this new role or if she'd rather stay where she was. "I know this is sudden," Sundberg said, her voice gentler now. "And I know you've built relationships with 3rd Platoon. But what you proved today needs to be shared, Corporal. There are hundreds of female soldiers who face the same doubts you faced, who are told they can't handle certain weapons or certain roles. You can show them it's possible." Helena thought about that, about the weight Sundberg had mentioned during the pre-mission briefing. Every time one of us succeeds, it opens doors. Every time one of us fails, it slams them shut for everyone who comes after. She'd succeeded. Spectacularly, undeniably succeeded. And now that success carried responsibilities that extended far beyond her own career. "I understand, ma'am," Helena said quietly. "When do I report?" "Tomorrow morning," Sundberg replied. "Tonight, you rest and receive medical treatment for those hands. Tomorrow, you begin the next phase of your service." As the officers dispersed, Brennan and Ridgway approached with the rest of 3rd Platoon's soldiers who'd survived the engagement. Their expressions were a mix of pride and sadness. Happiness for Helena's recognition tinged with regret that she'd be leaving. "Guess you're too good for us now," Brennan said with forced lightness. "Moving up to Division Headquarters, training the trainers." Helena shook her head. "I'm the same soldier I was yesterday, just with more visible scars." Ridgway extended his hand. "It's been an honor serving with you, Corporal, even if we didn't always show the respect you deserved." Helena shook his hand despite the pain in her blistered palm. "The honor was mine. You all gave me the chance to prove myself when it mattered most." As the soldiers dispersed to their barracks, Helena remained alone with the M249, the weapon that had defined her day, that had proven her capabilities beyond doubt, that had saved 50 lives through sustained, accurate fire. The medical bay was quiet that evening, most of the serious casualties already evacuated to larger facilities. Helena sat on an examination table while a doctor treated her hands with meticulous care, applying specialized burn dressings and pain medication that finally began to dull the constant throbbing. "These will heal," the doctor said, a captain whose nameplate read Morrison. "But you'll have scarring." Permanent reminder of today's engagement. She looked up at Helena with professional curiosity. "I heard what you did out there. 800 rounds with a weapon that most soldiers struggle to fire effectively for even a few minutes." "Just did my job, ma'am," Helena replied, the response automatic now. Morrison smiled slightly. "That's what everyone keeps saying you said. Just did my job. But we both know it was more than that." She finished wrapping Helena's hands in gauze and medical tape. "There, keep these clean and dry. Report back in 48 hours for reassessment." Helena left the medical bay and found herself walking toward the armory almost without conscious decision. The M249 was there, secured in a special locker pending official documentation and preservation. The armorer, a grizzled master sergeant named Kowalski, looked up as she entered. "Figured you'd come by," he said. "Weapons over here. Already photographed and documented, but I haven't started any preservation work yet." He led her to where the M249 sat on a maintenance bench, still bearing the scars of combat. "Wanted you to see it one more time before it gets locked away." Helena approached the weapon slowly, her bandaged hands hovering over it without quite touching. In the harsh fluorescent light of the armory, the damage was even more apparent. The barrel was warped and discolored. The housing showed heat stress fractures, and carbon scoring covered every surface. This weapon should have failed, Kowalski said quietly. Operating temperatures exceeded safe limits by a factor of 3. Sustained fire duration was 4 times the recommended maximum. By every technical specification, this M249 should have experienced catastrophic malfunction. He paused, running his own hand along the receiver. But it didn't. It kept firing until you ran dry. That's not just good engineering. That's something else. What do you mean something else? Helena asked. Kowalski met her eyes. In my 30 years maintaining weapons systems, I've seen equipment perform beyond specifications when operated by soldiers who refuse to accept failure. It's like the weapon absorbs the operator's determination, becomes more than just metal and springs and firing pins. He gestured at the M249. This weapon knew you needed it to perform the impossible. So it did. Helena didn't know if she believed in anthropomorphizing weapons, but she understood what Kowalski meant. The bond between soldier and firearm went deeper than mechanics. There was trust there, reliance, a partnership forged through training and proven in combat. What happens to it now? She asked. Gets preserved exactly as is and sent to the Army Weapons Museum at Rock Island Arsenal, Kowalski replied. They'll put it on display as an example of exceptional combat performance. Future generations of soldiers will see this weapon and learn what's possible when training, determination, and equipment work in perfect synchronization. The idea of the M249 sitting in a museum felt wrong somehow. This was a weapon meant for battle, for service, for the crucial task of keeping soldiers alive through superior firepower. Putting it behind glass seemed like a kind of death. But Helena understood the necessity. The weapon's combat life was over. Now, it would serve a different purpose, teaching and inspiring rather than fighting and killing. Perhaps that was a worthy end for a firearm that had performed so magnificently. A voice interrupted her thoughts. Didn't expect to find you here, Corporal. Helena turned to see Okonkwo entering the armory, his uniform exchanged for more casual duty clothes. The sergeant approached the bench and studied the M249 with the same reverence Helena felt. Kowalski's right, Okonkwo said. This weapon should have failed. I've been operating in combat zones for 8 years, seeing every kind of equipment malfunction you can imagine. What you asked of this M249 was beyond unreasonable. It was impossible. But it happened anyway, Helena replied. Because you made it happen, Okonkwo corrected. Your technique, your fire discipline, your tactical awareness, all of it combined to push this weapon to its absolute limits without crossing the line into catastrophic failure. That's not luck, Corporal. That's mastery. Helena felt uncomfortable with the praise, with the weight of expectation it carried. She never sought to be exceptional, had only wanted to be competent, to prove she belonged. I'm being reassigned tomorrow, she said, changing the subject. Division headquarters. Weapons instructor. I know, Okonkwo replied. Sunbird briefed me. It's the right move, even though 3rd Platoon will miss you. What you can teach other soldiers, especially female soldiers facing the same doubts you faced, that's valuable beyond measure. Helena nodded, still staring at the ruined M249. Will you tell me something honestly, Sergeant? Before today, before the engagement, did you believe I could handle this weapon in sustained combat? Okonkwo was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke with careful honesty. I wanted to believe it. Your range performance was exceptional. Your dedication to training was obvious. But honestly, I had doubts. Not because I wanted you to fail, but because I'd never seen anyone your size operate a crew-served weapon effectively under combat stress. Thank you for being honest, Helena said. But I was wrong, Okonkwo continued. My doubts were based on limited experience, on assumptions that turned out to be completely unfounded. You didn't just meet the standard today, Vance. You set a new one. You placed a hand on her shoulder. And that's what makes this reassignment so important. You're going to teach other soldiers that the old assumptions are obsolete. That capability comes from training and determination, not from fitting some outdated physical profile. Helena thought about that as she left the armory, Okonkwo walking beside her through the quiet base. The night was cool after the brutal heat of the day, stars brilliant overhead in the desert sky. They passed the memorial wall, where names of fallen soldiers were inscribed in stone. Helena paused, reading the 2 new names that would soon be added. The soldiers who died in the IED strike, who she hadn't been able to save despite her best efforts. You can't save everyone, Okonkwo said gently, reading her thoughts. War takes what it wants regardless of how hard we fight. But you saved 48 other soldiers today. 48 people who will go home to their families because you maintained fire when it mattered most. The words helped slightly. Helena knew intellectually that the deaths weren't her fault, that she'd done everything possible. But emotion didn't follow logic, and guilt didn't care about reason. They continued walking until they reached the barracks. Okonkwo stopped at the entrance, his expression serious in the dim light. One more thing, Corporal. What you did today, the performance you demonstrated, it's going to change you. Change how other soldiers see you. Change how you see yourself. Don't let it make you arrogant, but don't let it make you doubt yourself either. You earned this recognition through blood and fire. Own it. Helena nodded, understanding the wisdom in his words. She'd spent so long fighting against doubt that she'd almost forgotten how to accept validation when it came. Get some rest, Okonkwo said. Tomorrow starts your new assignment, and it'll be just as challenging as today was, just in different ways. Helena entered the barracks and found her bunk, the same space she'd occupied for months, but that somehow felt different now. Everything felt different. The battle had changed something fundamental, had transformed her from a soldier trying to prove herself into someone who had proven herself beyond any reasonable doubt. She lay down carefully, her bandaged hands resting on her chest, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow she would begin teaching others what she'd learned through trial and fire. Tomorrow she would start showing other female soldiers that the barriers were illusions, that capability mattered more than assumptions. But tonight, she was just Corporal Helena Vance, exhausted and wounded and carrying the weight of 2 dead soldiers and 48 saved lives. Tonight, she was human and vulnerable and uncertain about the future despite the recognition and the new assignment. Sleep came eventually, bringing dreams of the M249's roar and the valley's echoes and the moment when doubt died under the weight of undeniable performance. In those dreams, the weapon never failed, and the convoy never stopped, and everyone made it home safe. But reality was messier than dreams, and Helena woke several times during the night, hands throbbing despite medication, mind replaying every moment of the engagement, every decision, every burst of fire. By dawn, she was already awake and preparing for whatever came next. The battle was over, but the war against doubt and assumption and limitation would continue. Helena Vance had won one victory. Now she would help others win theirs, one trained soldier at a time, one shattered assumption at a time. The M249 might be headed for a museum, but its legacy would live on through every soldier Helena trained, through every assumption she challenged, through every door she helped open for those who came after. That legacy, Helena decided, was worth all the pain and doubt and struggle. That legacy would outlast any single engagement, any individual performance, any moment of glory or recognition. That legacy was why she served. Morning formation at Forward Operating Base Sentinel felt different than it had just 2 days ago. Helena stood in ranks with 3rd Platoon one final time, her bandaged hands concealed in gloves, her uniform crisp despite the early hour. Around her, soldiers who had once questioned her capabilities now stood with visible respect. Lieutenant Commander Sundberg addressed the formation, her voice carrying across the assembly area with practiced authority. As many of you know, yesterday's convoy engagement in the Kadir Valley resulted in sustained enemy contact and significant casualties. 2 soldiers made the ultimate sacrifice. 5 more were seriously wounded and evacuated to advanced medical facilities. The formation stood in somber silence. Helena felt the weight of those names, the soldiers who wouldn't be standing here, who had paid the price that combat always demanded. But today, Sundberg continued, we also recognize extraordinary performance under fire. Corporal Helena Vance, front and center. Helena marched forward, every eye in the formation tracking her movement. She came to attention before Sundberg, trying to ignore the hundreds of soldiers watching, the weight of scrutiny and expectation. Sundberg held a small case that Helena recognized as containing a military decoration. Corporal Vance, for exceptional valor and technical proficiency during sustained combat operations in the Kadir Valley, you are hereby awarded the Army Commendation Medal with Valor Device. Her voice carried clear and strong. Your employment of the M249 squad automatic weapon under extreme conditions, resulting in 13 confirmed enemy positions neutralized and preservation of 48 American lives, represents the highest traditions of military service. She pinned the medal to Helena's uniform, then stepped back and saluted. Helena returned the salute with precision, her throat tight with emotion she refused to show. Additionally, Sundberg said, effective immediately you are promoted to the rank of sergeant. Your demonstrated leadership and technical expertise warrant increased responsibility and authority. The formation erupted in applause, breaking the usual discipline of military ceremony. Helena stood frozen, processing the double recognition. A Valor Award and a promotion, both on the same day, both earned through the same desperate engagement. Sundberg allowed the applause to continue for a moment before raising her hand for silence. Sergeant Vance will be transferring to division headquarters today to serve as a weapons systems instructor. Her expertise will benefit the entire division, training future soldiers in proper crew-served weapon employment. After the formation dismissed, soldiers from 3rd Platoon crowded around Helena, offering congratulations and farewells. Brennan pushed through the crowd, his expression a mixture of pride and regret. Sergeant Vance, he said, emphasizing her new rank, has a good ring to it. He extended his hand. I know I gave you hell about the SAW assignment. Know that I'll regret that for the rest of my career. You showed me that my assumptions were garbage. Helena shook his hand firmly despite the pain in her blistered palm. You showed up when it mattered, Brennan. That's all any of us can do. Ridgway was next, his earlier mockery completely absent. Ma'am, I just want to say it was an honor serving with you. What you did out there, I've never seen anything like it. I won't forget it. Neither will I, Helena replied quietly. Farouk appeared with a medical kit, ever the professional. Let me check those hands before you leave. Can't have you reporting to division headquarters with infected burns. As Farouk examined and rewrapped Helena's bandages, more soldiers approached. Some Helena knew well, others were barely acquaintances. But all of them carried the same message of respect and recognition. The battle had transformed her from a questioned assignment into a legend. A vehicle arrived to transport Helena to division headquarters. She gathered her gear, surprised by how little she actually owned. A duffel bag of personal items, her weapon case minus the M249, and the memories of months spent with 3rd Platoon. Okonkwo walked her to the vehicle, his usual stern expression softened slightly. You're going to do great things at division, Sergeant. But remember where you came from. Remember the soldiers who fought beside you. I will, Helena promised. Every single day, the drive to division headquarters took 2 hours through desert terrain that had become familiar during her deployment. Helena watched the landscape roll past, thinking about everything that had changed in such a short time. 2 days ago, she'd been fighting to prove herself. Now she was being sent to teach others. Division headquarters was a larger installation than Forward Operating Base Sentinel, with more permanent structures and significantly more personnel. Helena reported to the G3 operations office as instructed, where Major named Patterson was waiting. Sergeant Vance, Patterson said, reviewing her orders. I read the after-action reports from the Kadir Valley engagement. Impressive, doesn't begin to cover it. He looked up from the paperwork. Your primary responsibility will be conducting advanced weapons training, with specific focus on crew-served weapon systems. We've got 200 soldiers waiting for your first class next week. 200 soldiers. The number was staggering. Helena had trained individuals in small groups before, but never on this scale. Patterson seemed to read her hesitation. Don't worry. You'll have assistant instructors and support staff. but the curriculum design and primary instruction will be your responsibility. He handed her a tablet loaded with training materials. These are the current standard programs. I want you to review them and provide recommendations for improvement based on your combat experience. Helena spent the rest of the day reviewing training materials and meeting her new team. There were 3 assistant instructors, all experienced soldiers with multiple deployments, and a logistics coordinator who would handle equipment and range scheduling. But the most important meeting came late in the afternoon when a young private first class named Alvarez knocked on Helena's temporary office door. The soldier was perhaps 20 years old, barely 5 feet tall, and visibly nervous. "Sergeant Vance," Alvarez said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I heard you were assigned here. I'm scheduled for your first training class next week." She paused, struggling with words. "I've been trying to qualify on the M240 for 6 months. Every instructor tells me I'm too small, that I should focus on lighter weapons. But I want to be a machine gunner." Helena saw herself in Alvarez's face, saw the determination mixed with doubt, the desire to prove capability against assumptions that seemed insurmountable. "Why do you want to be a machine gunner?" Helena asked. Alvarez met her eyes with surprising intensity. "Because everyone says I can't. Because I know I can do it if someone just gives me the chance and the proper training. Because I'm tired of being told my size determines my capabilities." Helena smiled, the first genuine smile since the battle. "Then you're in the right place, Private. Next week, I'm going to show you that size has nothing to do with operating crew-served weapons. Technique, training, and determination are what matter." "Really?" Alvarez's face lit up with hope. "You think I can do it?" Helena thought about the M249 roaring in her hands, about 800 rounds fired in sustained combat, about proving every doubt wrong through sheer determined performance. "I know you can do it," she said firmly, "because 2 days ago, I did the impossible with a weapon everyone said I couldn't handle. And if I can do it, so can you. So can anyone willing to put in the work and refuse to accept limitations that exist only in other people's minds?" Alvarez left the office with visible confidence, her bearing transformed by hope and validation. Helena watched her go and understood with sudden clarity why this new assignment mattered so much. She wasn't just teaching weapons systems. She was teaching soldiers that they were capable of more than anyone expected, that assumptions were meant to be challenged, that excellence came from training and determination rather than fitting some predetermined physical profile. The M249 that saved 50 lives in the Kadir Valley was headed for a museum. But the lessons it taught, the barriers it shattered, the assumptions it destroyed, those would live on through every soldier Helena trained. That evening, Helena stood on the headquarters observation deck and looked out across the installation. Hundreds of soldiers moved through their duties, each one carrying their own doubts and determinations, their own struggles against limitation. Soon, some of them would be in her classroom, learning what she had proven in Fire and Blood. That capability transcended size. That determination mattered more than assumption. That excellence was available to anyone willing to demand it from themselves. Helena touched the metal on her uniform, feeling its weight. Not the physical weight of metal and ribbon, but the weight of responsibility it represented. The responsibility to teach, to inspire, to open doors for those who came after. The battle in the Kadir Valley was over, but the war against doubt and limitation would continue through every class she taught, every soldier she trained, every assumption she helped destroy. And Helena Vance was ready for that war, more ready than she'd ever been for anything in her life. 6 months passed like wind across the desert, fast and relentless. Helena stood at the front of the weapons training range, watching her latest class of 200 soldiers work through live fire exercises with crew-served weapons. The morning sun painted everything in shades of gold, and the familiar sound of sustained automatic fire echoed across the valley. Private First Class Alvarez was on the M240, firing controlled bursts with technique that would have been impossible 6 months ago. The young soldier had transformed from hesitant and doubted into confident and capable, proving exactly what Helena had known was possible. "Excellent control, Alvarez," Helena called out. maintain that sight picture and breathing rhythm. The transformation wasn't limited to Alvarez. Helena had trained over 800 soldiers in advanced weapons systems during her 6 months at division headquarters. Female soldiers who had been told they couldn't handle heavy weapons now operated them with proficiency that matched or exceeded their male counterparts. Male soldiers who had harbored doubts about women's capabilities had those assumptions systematically dismantled through demonstrated performance. The training program Helena developed emphasized technique over strength, tactical awareness over raw physical power. She taught the same principles that had allowed her to fire 800 rounds in sustained combat, the same methods that had saved 50 lives in the Kadir Valley. And it worked. Qualification rates improved across the division. Female soldier assignments to crew-served weapons increased by 40%. Combat readiness ratings climbed as more soldiers demonstrated proficiency with weapons previously considered beyond their capabilities. Sergeant Vance, a voice called from behind her. Helena turned to see Lieutenant Commander Sundberg approaching the range, accompanied by several officers Helena didn't recognize. "Ma'am," Helena said, coming to attention. "At ease, Sergeant," Sundberg replied. "I want to introduce you to some people. This is General Catherine Brenner from Army Human Resources Command and Colonel David Shun from the Pentagon's Force Development Office." Helena felt her stomach tighten. General officers and Pentagon officials didn't visit training ranges without significant reason. "Sergeant Vance," General Brenner said, her voice carrying the authority of decades in service. "We've been reviewing data from your training program. The results are remarkable. Qualification rates up across all demographics. Combat readiness improved, and perhaps most significantly, a measurable reduction in gender-based assignment restrictions." "Thank you, ma'am," Helena replied, uncertain where this was heading. Colonel Chin stepped forward, holding a tablet. "We want to expand your program Army-wide. Create a standardized curriculum based on your methods and deploy it to training installations across all commands." He looked at her directly. "We're talking about transforming how the Army approaches crew-served weapons training for all soldiers, regardless of size or gender." The scope of what he was proposing stunned Helena. Her small program at division headquarters expanded to the entire Army. Thousands of soldiers trained using methods she'd developed, principles she'd proven in combat. "That's a massive undertaking, sir," Helena said carefully. "It would require significant resources, instructor training, curriculum development. Which is why we want you to lead it," General Brenner said. "Promotion to Staff Sergeant, assignment to the Army Training and Doctrine Command, and primary responsibility for developing and implementing the new program." Helena's mind raced. This was beyond anything she'd imagined, beyond any ambition she'd harbored. From corporal fighting to prove herself capable to Staff Sergeant reshaping Army training doctrine, all in less than a year. "I'm honored, ma'am," Helena said, "but I'm not sure I'm qualified for something of this magnitude." Sundberg smiled slightly. 6 months ago, people said you weren't qualified to operate the M249 in sustained combat. You proved them wrong by saving 50 lives and firing 800 rounds under conditions that should have been impossible. If you can do that, you can do this. General Brenner nodded. What happened in the Kadir Valley wasn't just about one soldier's exceptional performance, Sergeant. It was about challenging fundamental assumptions that have limited the Army's effectiveness for decades. We need that same willingness to challenge assumptions applied to our training systems. Helena thought about Alvarez on the M240, about the hundreds of other soldiers she'd trained, about the barriers that were falling one demonstration of capability at a time. This new assignment would accelerate that process, would bring the lessons she'd learned to the entire Army. "When would I start, ma'am?" Helena asked. "Next month," General Brenner replied. "You'll report to Fort Eustis for initial coordination, then begin developing the curriculum framework. We're allocating significant funding and personnel to support this initiative." After the officers departed, Helena returned her attention to the range. Alvarez had finished her qualification and was helping another soldier adjust their firing position, passing along the techniques Helena had taught her. the cycle of training and improvement continuing, expanding outward like ripples in water. That evening, Helena received a video call from Okonkwo. The sergeant was still deployed, still leading soldiers in combat, but he'd kept in touch throughout her time at division headquarters. "Heard about your promotion and new assignment," he said, his face pixelated on the screen, but his pride evident. "Staff Sergeant Vance, reshaping Army training doctrine. Never doubted you'd end up doing something significant." "I'm terrified," Helena admitted. "This is so much bigger than anything I've done before." "Good," Okonkwo replied. "Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you from getting complacent. But don't let it paralyze you. You've already proven you can perform under impossible pressure. This is just a different kind of pressure." "How's 3rd Platoon?" Helena asked. "Missing you," Okonkwo said, "but proud of you. Brennan talks about your performance in the Kadir Valley like it's scripture, uses it to shut down anyone who questions female soldiers' capabilities." He paused. "The impact you had goes beyond just the soldiers you trained, Vance. You changed minds, changed culture. That matters more than any single engagement." After the call ended, Helena walked through the division headquarters campus, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. From a corporal fighting constant doubt to a staff sergeant tasked with transforming Army training. From proving herself capable to teaching thousands of others they were capable too. She passed the memorial garden where names of fallen soldiers were inscribed. The 2 soldiers from the Kadir Valley convoy were there, their names carved in stone alongside hundreds of others who had made the ultimate sacrifice. Helena paused, reading their names, remembering. The M249 she'd fired that day was indeed in a museum now, preserved exactly as it had emerged from combat. But its legacy lived on through every soldier trained in the methods Helena had developed, through every barrier broken, through every assumption challenged. Helena thought about Private First Class Alvarez, about the young soldier's transformation from doubted to capable. She thought about the 800 soldiers already trained and the thousands more who would benefit from the expanded program. She thought about the doors opening, the opportunities expanding, the Army slowly becoming what it always should have been. A place where capability mattered more than assumptions, where performance determined assignment, where excellence was available to anyone willing to demand it from themselves regardless of size or gender or any other arbitrary limitation. The sun was setting over the installation, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Helena stood in that golden light and felt the weight of responsibility settling onto her shoulders. Not the crushing weight of doubt and skepticism she'd carried for so long, but the empowering weight of purpose and mission. She was Staff Sergeant Helena Vance, and she had work to do. Soldiers to train, barriers to break, assumptions to destroy. The battle in the Kadir Valley had proven what one soldier could accomplish against impossible odds. Now she would prove what that one soldier could inspire thousands of others to accomplish. The M249 had roared its defiance in the valley, had saved 50 lives through sustained, accurate fire. Now Helena would roar her own defiance through transformed training, through opened opportunities, through systematic dismantling of every barrier that told soldiers they couldn't achieve excellence. If this story moved you, share your thoughts about your favorite moment, or tell us about someone you know who proved the doubters wrong when it mattered most. Because Helena's story isn't unique. It's happening every day, in every unit, wherever soldiers refuse to accept limitations and demand the chance to prove their capabilities. The doubters said she couldn't handle the M249. They said it was too heavy, too demanding, too much for some of her size. They were wrong about Helena Vance. And they're wrong about every soldier who hears those same doubts and chooses to prove capability through performance rather than accept limitation through assumption. Helena walked back to her quarters as darkness fell, already planning the curriculum that would transform Army training, already imagining the thousands of soldiers who would benefit from the lessons she'd learned in Fire and Blood. The battle was over, but the mission continued, and Staff Sergeant Helena Vance was ready to lead it, one trained soldier at a time, one shattered assumption at a time, one open door at a time. until every soldier had the chance to prove what they were truly capable of accomplishing, regardless of what anyone else believed was possible. That was the legacy of the Kadir Valley. That was the promise of 800 rounds fired in sustained combat. That was the future Helena Vance would help build, one demonstration of excellence at a time. And it started tomorrow, with the next class, with the next soldier who needed to learn that they were capable of more than anyone expected. Helena was ready. She'd always been ready. Now the army was finally ready too.